There is something timeless about the sound of a clock. The gentle tick, steady and calm, has followed humanity through centuries, becoming both a companion and a reminder. When we listen closely, each tick is like a heartbeat of history itself, carrying with it the wisdom of those who once shaped the craft of timekeeping. For many people, the sound of a clock has always been more than just a measure of passing seconds. It has been a rhythm that offers comfort, a sound that fills empty rooms, and a guide that quietly marks the flow of life. In this journey, we will step into the world of clockmakers, those careful craftsmen who shape time into something we could hold, hear, and trust. The story of the clockmaker is not filled with noise or chaos. Instead, it is slow, steady, and patient. It mirrors the very tools they created. A clock does not rush. It does not demand. It simply continues, one tick after another, until the listener begins to feel calm, almost lulled into peace. Imagine, for a moment, a small workshop lit by the warm glow of a lamp. A clockmaker sits quietly, surrounded by tiny gears, polished brass, and smooth wooden casings. Outside, the world may be filled with noise and urgency, but inside, only the sound of ticking fills the air. Each movement of the clockmaker's hand is deliberate. Each adjustment requires patience, care, and focus. There is no rush in this place, only devotion to the art of keeping time. The purpose of this story is not to hurry you. It is not to fill your mind with excitement or restlessness. Instead, it is to allow you to slow down. Just as the clock ticks at its own gentle pace, so too will we move calmly through this history. We will not race from moment to moment. Instead, we will pause, we will reflect, and we will travel through the centuries with ease. History itself often carries a sense of weight. Wars, rulers, inventions, and discoveries can sound heavy when told with urgency. But tonight, we are not rushing through battles or arguments. We are not listing dates like commands. Instead, we are letting the story unfold gently, like the turning of a clock's hand. By doing so, the story becomes something soothing, something that flows like a quiet river in the night. The introduction of clockmakers is also the introduction of patience. Their craft demanded silence, focus, and long hours of dedication. For them, time was not an enemy. It was not something to fear or fight against. Time was a friend, a companion to guide them as they built each mechanism. In the same way, this story will guide you. If you listen carefully, you may notice your breath beginning to slow, your shoulders beginning to relax, and your thoughts becoming softer. Every culture has known the passing of time, but not every culture has celebrated it in the same way. The art of measuring time is deeply human. It is the desire to understand the rhythm of day and night, to capture the flow of seasons, and to bring order to the endless turning of the world. The clockmaker, then, is more than just a craftsman. He is a storyteller of time itself, shaping hours into a melody that can be heard in every gentle tick. So as we begin, I invite you to settle into this calm journey. Let the sound of ticking guide your imagination. We will walk slowly, exploring the history of timekeeping, not with urgency, but with peace. Each section of this story is designed not only to inform you, but also to calm you, to steady your thoughts, and to allow your mind to drift softly toward rest. Time is not only about movement forward. It is also about presence in the moment. Tonight, as you listen, remember that you are part of this flow, just as every clockmaker was, just as every clock has been. Together, we will explore the gentle story of clocks and the people who gave them life. Like a quiet conversation in the night, this story will remain steady, patient, and unhurried. So let us begin, with calm steps, into the world of the clockmaker's gentle ticks. Like and subscribe. When people first looked for ways to measure the passing of hours, their eyes naturally turned toward the sky. The sun, rising each morning and setting each evening, offered the most reliable signal of time. From this observation came one of humanity's earliest inventions, the sundial. A sundial was simple in design, yet filled with meaning. A stick or pillar, placed upright in the ground, would cast a shadow as the sun moved across the sky. The changing position of this shadow told people when it was morning, when the day was at its height, and when evening began to fall. The sundial was not only a tool, but also a gentle reminder of the connection between humanity and nature. It did not require noise, gears, or complex systems. All it asked for was patience and the light of the sun. Civilizations from Egypt to Greece, from Rome to China, adopted sundials, each culture creating its own style and design. Some were carved from stone, others carefully marked on flat surfaces, but all carried the same purpose: to bring the movement of the heavens down to earth in a form people could understand. In Egypt, tall obelisks acted as giant sundials. Their long shadows moved slowly across the desert sands, marking not only the passing of hours, but also the balance between light and darkness. In Greece and Rome, smaller, more personal sundials became part of daily life, allowing people to divide the day into measured sections. For the first time, human activity could be organized by something more precise than the simple rising and setting of the sun. Yet, the sundial had its limits. On cloudy days, it offered no guidance. At night, when the sun was gone, it fell silent. Humanity needed a way to measure time that did not depend on clear skies. From this need came another invention, the water clock. Known in different places as the clepsydra, the water clock used the steady flow of liquid to mark the passing of moments. The water clock was elegant in its own way. A container filled with water would slowly drip into another vessel, or sometimes water would flow out through a small hole at the bottom. By observing the level of water rising or falling, people could measure hours with surprising accuracy. The sound of dripping water, steady and calm, became one of the earliest ticking rhythms in history. Unlike the sundial, the water clock did not sleep when the sun set. It could guide people through the night, through cloudy days, and through long ceremonies where precision was needed. In ancient Babylon, priests used water clocks to time rituals, believing that precise measurements connected them more closely with the divine. In Greece, courts used water clocks to limit how long a speaker could address the assembly, ensuring fairness. In China, inventors created complex water-driven devices, some decorated with carvings and statues, which amazed those who watched them. These creations were not only practical but also beautiful, blending science with art. The sundial and the water clock represent two sides of human imagination. The sundial depended on the heavens, on the great light above, and reminded people of their bond with the universe. The water clock, on the other hand, used the quiet flow of nature on earth, the gentle dripping that mirrored the steady rhythm of life. Together, they shaped the earliest understanding of measured time. When we think of these inventions today, they may appear simple compared to the intricate gears of later centuries. Yet for the people who first relied on them, they were revolutionary. They turned the abstract idea of passing hours into something visible and tangible. They gave order to daily life, structure to work, and comfort in knowing that time could be understood. The sundial and the water clock were not just machines. They were companions to humanity, silent but steady, reminding each generation that time flows whether we notice it or not. Their calm presence, like the ticking clocks that would come later, offered both guidance and reassurance. In every shadow that stretched across the sundial, and in every drop of water that fell through a clepsydra, there was a lesson. Time moves slowly, steadily, and without pause. It cannot be hurried. It cannot be delayed. It flows as naturally as light and as gently as water. These early inventions prepared the way for the clockmakers of the future. They showed that time could be captured, studied, and even shared. But most of all, they showed that time, when observed closely, brings calm. The sundial's shadow and the water clock's drip both remind us to slow down, to notice, and to live in harmony with the steady rhythm that surrounds us all. Like and subscribe. As the Middle Ages unfolded across Europe, the rhythm of time began to take on a new shape. Sundials and water clocks had guided earlier generations, but a new demand was rising. Towns were growing larger, churches were at the heart of daily life, and communities needed a way to share a common sense of time. It was no longer enough for individuals to read shadows or watch dripping water. Entire cities wanted to hear time, to see it displayed in a form that all could trust. Out of this desire emerged the first great clockmakers of medieval Europe. The earliest mechanical clocks were not small instruments for private use, but towering creations placed in cathedrals, monasteries, and town squares. Built with weights, gears, and wheels, these clocks did not depend on sunlight or water. Instead, they relied on human invention. When the bells rang from a church tower, they announced the hour to everyone within earshot. Farmers in the fields, merchants in the markets, and monks in the cloisters all adjusted their lives to these powerful sounds. For the first time, communities moved together under the guidance of mechanical time. Monasteries played a central role in this development. The daily rhythm of prayer, known as the canonical hours, required precise timing. Monks needed a way to know when dawn had arrived, when midday was near, and when evening prayers should begin. Their devotion to order and discipline encouraged experiments in machinery that could keep track of time without constant supervision. Many of the earliest mechanical clocks were born from these sacred spaces, blending spiritual purpose with technical innovation. As the craft spread, clockmakers became respected figures in European towns. They were not ordinary artisans. Their work demanded skill in metal, wood, and design, but also knowledge of mathematics and astronomy. A clockmaker was both craftsman and scientist, artist and engineer. Each new creation carried with it the pride of a town, often displayed high above the streets where all could admire it. The sound of the bell was not only practical, but symbolic. It declared the strength and unity of the community. Some of these early clocks were astonishing in their beauty. They did not simply strike the hours, but also displayed moving figures, zodiac signs, and celestial maps. In places like Strasbourg, Prague, and Salisbury, great astronomical clocks were built that still inspire wonder centuries later. They were not just machines of utility, but expressions of art, faith, and knowledge. Each tick of their gears carried with it the combined effort of countless hands and minds. Yet, the life of a medieval clockmaker was not simple. The work required endless patience, long hours, and constant care. Gears had to be cut with precision, weights balanced carefully, and wheels aligned with perfect accuracy. A single mistake could silence the entire mechanism. For this reason, clockmakers guarded their skills closely, passing knowledge only to trusted apprentices. Over time, guilds were formed, ensuring that traditions were preserved and standards maintained. The Guild of Clockmakers was more than a professional group. It was a brotherhood, a society bound together by secrecy, discipline, and pride in the craft. To join, one had to prove skill, loyalty, and patience. Apprentices often spent years learning the simplest tasks before being trusted with complex designs. But once accepted, a clockmaker held a position of honor, recognized as someone who shaped the very rhythm of life. It is important to remember the atmosphere of these towns during the Middle Ages. Life was often uncertain, filled with challenges, struggles, and unpredictability. Yet, amid this uncertainty, the sound of the town clock offered stability. Its ringing bell assured people that even if the world around them felt unstable, time itself remained steady. It gave order to days that might otherwise feel chaotic, and in that order, there was comfort. The rise of medieval clockmakers marked a turning point in history. Time was no longer guided only by the natural world. It was now something shaped by human hands, captured in gears and bells. This change carried with it a new awareness. People began to see life not only in seasons and cycles, but in measured hours. Work became more structured, prayer more precise, and communities more unified. These early craftsmen set the stage for the centuries that followed. Their devotion, skill, and to step into the workshop of a medieval or early modern clockmaker was to enter a world of patience, silence, and delicate precision. The space itself was often modest, sometimes only a small room with a window to let in the daylight. The floor might have been scattered with wood shavings, fine dust from filing metal, and scraps of leather or cloth used for polishing. Yet, despite the simple setting, the workshop carried an atmosphere of reverence. It was a place where time itself was shaped into form, where every sound and every movement mattered. The most noticeable feature of such a workshop was not the noise of hammering or clattering, but the quiet ticking of unfinished mechanisms resting on wooden benches. Small gears, half-assembled escapements, and polished brass pieces sat neatly arranged in boxes or laid out carefully across the surface. The clockmaker worked slowly, never rushing, because every adjustment required focus. His tools were not many, but each one was essential: tiny files for shaping, fine saws for cutting, hammers for tapping, and brushes for dusting the smallest fragments away. Light was precious. The window often served as the main source of brightness, allowing the craftsman to see the tiny details of his work. Candles or oil lamps were used in the darker hours, their flickering glow creating shadows across the bench. This soft light added to the atmosphere of patience. There was no urgency here, no pressure to finish quickly. The work itself demanded respect, and the clockmaker gave it willingly. The scent of the workshop carried its own calm presence. The sharp tang of polished metal mingled with the warmer smell of oak and walnut used for the clock's casing. Sometimes there was the faint scent of oil, used to keep the gears moving smoothly. These aromas, subtle but steady, became part of the memory of every apprentice who entered the space. For them, the workshop was not only a place of labor but also a sanctuary where they learned to listen, observe, and understand the rhythm of time. An apprentice's life in the workshop was one of steady learning. At first, he was not allowed near the delicate mechanisms. Instead, he swept the floor, polished wood, and carried tools. Over time, he would be taught how to cut a gear, how to file a piece of brass, and how to balance a wheel so it moved evenly. Each stage of the work required discipline. The apprentice learned that mistakes were not simply errors, but lessons in patience. A clock could not forgive a rushed hand. Every slip left a mark, and every mark reminded the learner to move more carefully. The master clockmaker, often seated at the central bench, carried a quiet dignity. His hands moved with certainty, his eyes studied each part with calm focus. He did not waste words, for the work itself was the true teacher. To watch him was to understand that time itself could be touched, shaped, and made visible. When he adjusted a gear or set a balance wheel in motion, the workshop filled with a soft, reassuring sound, the steady rhythm of ticking. For those who entered, the workshop could feel almost magical. Outside, life was full of noise, disputes, and uncertainty. Inside, time was orderly, steady, and gentle. The rhythm of tools against wood, the turning of gears, and the occasional chime of a completed mechanism created an environment of quiet harmony. Each clock made within those walls carried the spirit of this place, a memory of the patience and care that went into its creation. The daily life of a clockmaker was not glamorous, yet it was deeply meaningful. Hours passed unnoticed as he bent over his work. Meals were often simple, taken quickly, before returning to the bench. The outside world measured time in bells and schedules, but for the clockmaker, time existed in the pieces before him. A day was not marked by the sun, but by the completion of a wheel, the polishing of a dial, or the successful testing of an escapement. In the quiet of evening, when the tools were set aside and the lamp burned low, the workshop often held a gentle silence. The unfinished clocks continued their soft ticking, as if reminding the craftsman that his work was never truly complete. Time itself did not stop, and neither did the devotion of those who sought to measure it. For the clockmaker, each day in the workshop was not only a profession, but a way of life, a partnership with the flow of hours, a humble service to the eternal rhythm of existence. Like and subscribe. In every clockmaker's workshop, the presence of apprentices carried with it both promise and challenge. These young learners, often no more than boys at the age of 12 or 13, entered the craft with wide eyes and restless energy. Their journey was not simply about learning a trade, it was about shaping their character. The making of a clock demanded more than skill with tools, it demanded patience, discipline, and humility. These were lessons that could not be taught in a single day, but rather absorbed through years of steady practice. An apprentice's earliest tasks were rarely exciting. He did not begin by touching the gears or adjusting the delicate escapement. Instead, he started with the simplest chores, sweeping the workshop floor, polishing wooden cases, and fetching oil or tools for the master. These jobs, though plain, were a kind of quiet training. They taught the apprentice to notice detail, to care for the space where time was created, and to respect the tools before ever using them. Every sweep of the broom, every polish of a surface, was a step toward understanding the value of order and precision. The apprentices quickly discovered that their greatest challenge was not the difficulty of the work, but their own impatience. Youth longed for progress, for results that came quickly. Yet clockmaking offered no shortcuts. If a gear was filed too roughly, it would not turn properly. If a wheel was cut at the wrong angle, the entire mechanism would falter. The young learner had to accept that mistakes were part of the process. More importantly, he had to learn that rushing only led to more mistakes. In the world of clocks, haste was the enemy of harmony. To teach this lesson, masters often gave apprentices tasks that required slow repetition. Filing a piece of brass for hours until its edge was perfectly smooth. Polishing a single gear until it reflected light without a blemish. Drawing sketches of mechanisms again and again until every line was precise. These exercises were not punishment, though they might have felt that way to a restless apprentice. Instead, they were practice in the art of patience. The boy learned to quiet his own eagerness, to move steadily rather than quickly, and to find satisfaction in the calm rhythm of the work. The relationship between apprentice and master was also a study in patience. The master rarely scolded harshly, but neither did he offer easy praise. His approval came in small gestures, a nod of acceptance, a short word of encouragement, or the quiet trust of letting the apprentice handle a more delicate task. Each of these moments carried weight, for they signaled progress. The apprentice knew that every step forward was earned, never given freely. Evenings in the workshop often revealed the true test of endurance. While friends outside played or rested, the apprentice remained at the bench, polishing or adjusting, his eyes strained in the dim light of an oil lamp. Fatigue crept in, and frustration whispered that the work was endless. Yet with time, the young craftsman learned a deeper truth, that patience itself could become a kind of strength. To endure long hours without complaint, to repeat motions until they became steady and natural, was to gain mastery not only over tools but also over oneself. Apprentices also learned patience from the clocks themselves. The steady tick of a mechanism in progress served as a quiet teacher. Unlike human voices, it did not hurry or pause. It reminded the learner that time flowed at its own pace, unaffected by desire or frustration. By listening to that rhythm day after day, the apprentice began to understand that his work was not about forcing time but about moving in harmony with it. Over years of training, the impatient boy slowly transformed into a craftsman who understood balance, detail, and endurance. He discovered that patience was not the absence of effort, but the calm persistence of steady effort. When at last he was entrusted with making his first complete clock, he approached the task not with the rush of ambition but with the quiet confidence of one who had learned to wait, to listen, and to move carefully. Thus, the workshop was not only a place of gears and wood and metal. It was a school of character, where apprentices grew not only into clockmakers but also into men of discipline. The art of patience, once learned, would serve them in every part of life, far beyond the ticking of clocks. Like and subscribe. Every craft is defined not only by the skill of its master but also by the tools he holds in his hands. In the quiet workshop of a clockmaker, the air carried the faint scent of oil, brass, and polished wood. Light from the window glimmered upon rows of carefully arranged instruments, each with its own purpose, each waiting patiently to bring order to time. These tools were not ordinary items found in every household. In the stillness of a quiet room, where the outside world fades into the background, there exists a sound both simple and profound. It is not loud, nor does it demand attention. Instead, it lingers softly, steady and unbroken, like a whisper of eternity. This is the sound of the tick, the heart of a clock, beating gently in harmony with the passage of time. For centuries, that sound has carried comfort to those who listen, a reminder that even as the world changes, rhythm remains. The tick of a clock is unlike any other sound. It is not the heavy strike of a hammer, nor the sudden cry of a bell. Instead, it is measured, predictable, and calm. One tick follows another, always at the same distance, always with the same certainty. It does not rush, nor does it delay. It simply continues, as though it has no beginning and no end. In this constancy, listeners find reassurance. The world outside may grow restless, storms may rise, voices may clash, yet within a room, the tick endures, a small but powerful anchor against chaos. For many, the tick carries them into sleep. Long before machines hummed or electric devices filled homes with noise, the clock's voice was often the last sound heard at night. Children resting in wooden beds would close their eyes as the gentle beat of time lulled them into dreams. The sound was steady enough to be trusted, soft enough to bring comfort, yet persistent enough to remind them that they were never alone. Even in the darkest hours, when silence could feel vast and uncertain, the clock whispered a reminder of order. Time had not abandoned them. It continued, faithfully. The comfort of the tick lies in its simplicity. Unlike music, it carries no melody to distract or overwhelm. Unlike speech, it asks for no answer. It is presence without demand, offering peace without interruption. For those lying awake in worry, the sound can become a companion. Each tick falls like a gentle assurance: you are here, you are safe, and the night is passing. Slowly, anxiety softens, thoughts grow lighter, and sleep arrives, carried on the rhythm of time. In certain moments, the tick also reflects memory. For many, it recalls the homes of grandparents, where tall wooden clocks stood proudly in corners, their pendulums swinging like slow breaths. Visitors would sit in silence, hearing the faint sound echo across the room, mingling with the creak of floorboards and the rustle of pages. Those sounds together built a tapestry of peace, one that remained in memory long after the house grew empty. Even today, the tick can call forth those images: warm rooms, calm evenings, and the presence of loved ones long gone. Writers and poets have long found inspiration in the gentle tick. In literature, it is often a symbol of patience, of waiting, of life's measured pace. Painters have captured the image of clocks resting on tables or hanging upon walls, their hands frozen in stillness, yet always suggesting the hidden sound behind them. Musicians too, though their art moves in flowing rhythms, often turn to the tick of a clock as a reminder of the unchanging pulse upon which all music is built. The sound is not merely functional, it is deeply human, resonating with something inside us that longs for order and steadiness. In moments of solitude, the tick can even take on a spiritual meaning. To some, it is the heartbeat of time itself, a reminder that each moment is a gift. To others, it is the echo of their own breath, aligning them with the passage of minutes and hours. Meditation often calls for focus on a sound or rhythm, and for many, the quiet tick of a clock becomes that focus. With each beat, distractions fall away, leaving only stillness and presence. The power of the tick is also found in contrast. Imagine a room without it. The silence may feel heavy, almost hollow, as though something vital is missing. The tick fills that emptiness with life. It marks the invisible passage of time, transforming silence into rhythm. In this way, a clock is more than an object, it is a companion, breathing life into stillness, giving shape to what would otherwise pass unnoticed. Even in modern times, where digital clocks glow silently on screens and phones, the allure of the tick endures. Many people purchase traditional clocks not only for their beauty but for the sound they bring into a room. The tick is a thread connecting the present to the past, linking busy modern lives with the calm traditions of earlier days. In bedrooms, studies, and living rooms, the tick returns, carrying its same quiet promise: that time is steady, that rhythm remains, that peace is always near. And so, the gentle tick continues to comfort. It is a small sound, often overlooked, yet powerful in its constancy. To those who seek rest, it is a lullaby. To those who remember, it is a link to home. To those who reflect, it is a meditation on life itself. In every case, the tick is never just a noise, it is an assurance, a presence, a faithful reminder that time, like a companion, walks beside us always. Like and subscribe. Time has always been more than a number on a clock. It is not only hours and minutes passing by, but also a mirror of life itself. Every culture, every family, every individual attaches meaning to time. The tick of a clock is not just sound, it is a reminder of life's rhythm, of beginnings, of endings, and of all the spaces in between. Time becomes a language, speaking to us even when no words are spoken. Morning, for instance, carries a symbol of renewal. When the clock strikes dawn, people see in it a chance to start again. The early hours whisper of fresh possibilities, of tasks waiting to be fulfilled, of hopes yet to be pursued. A clock in the morning does not only tell us that it is 6 or 7, it tells us that life has given us another day. To wake at that hour, to hear the steady tick while the sun begins to rise, is to be reminded of the gift of continuation. As the day moves forward, time takes on another symbol, that of structure and order. Appointments, meals, work, and conversations all unfold within the frame of hours and minutes. Without clocks, life could feel uncertain and scattered. But when we glance at the hands moving steadily forward, we know where we stand. Time in this sense becomes a guide, a silent companion ensuring that tasks are met, journeys are begun, and pauses are allowed. In daily life, this order brings not only efficiency but also comfort. It tells us we are moving, step by step, towards something. Evening carries a softer symbol. As the hands of the clock drift toward night, they speak of rest and reflection. Families gather around dinner tables, conversations flow, and lights dim. The clock at this hour becomes a gentle reminder that every day has a closing chapter. Its tick is slower in spirit, quieter in meaning, urging us not to rush, but to embrace peace before the cycle begins again. It tells us that endings are not final, but part of a rhythm that continues endlessly. Beyond the daily schedule, time also symbolizes deeper truths. In love, for example, people speak of shared moments, of anniversaries, of forever. In loss, they speak of borrowed time, of moments that slipped away, of wishing for just one more hour. Time becomes a vessel for emotion, carrying the weight of memory and the longing for what cannot return. A clock, therefore, is never only an object, it holds joy, sorrow, and every fragile feeling between. Different cultures add even more layers to this symbolism. In some traditions, time is circular, like the turning of the seasons or the cycles of the moon. Life is seen as a wheel, endlessly repeating, where endings lead back to beginnings. In others, time is a straight path, a line that moves from birth to death, from creation to conclusion. In both views, clocks stand as symbols of human attempts to grasp what is infinite and invisible. They are our way of giving shape to something that otherwise slips silently past. In homes, time has its personal meaning as well. The clock hanging on a wall may mark not only hours, but also the laughter of children running by, the quiet of long evenings, or the voices of guests who once sat in the room. For many, the sound of a clock is tied to memory, the memory of waiting, of celebrating, of simply being present in life's flow. To hear its tick is to step back into those moments, carried not by thought alone, but by rhythm itself. There is also the symbolism of patience. Every tick and tock reminds us that all things unfold in their own moment. Seeds grow into trees not instantly, but over years marked by countless turns of the clock. Dreams are not realized in a single second, but in steady hours of effort and waiting. In this way, the clock becomes a teacher. Its gentle persistence shows us that rushing brings little, but patience, aligned with time, brings everything. Perhaps one of the most comforting symbols is that of continuity. When we listen to the ticking of a clock today, it is easy to forget that behind this sound lies centuries of devotion, artistry, and invention. Clocks did not simply appear in homes and towers on their own. They were born from the hands and imaginations of extraordinary clockmakers, men who spent years shaping gears, polishing brass, and testing new ideas until the measure of time itself was forever changed. To explore their lives is to step into a lineage of patience, genius, and beauty that still echoes with every tick. One of the earliest and most celebrated figures is Peter Henlein of Nuremberg, Germany, often credited with creating the first portable watch in the early 1500s. His work was not merely mechanical, it was symbolic of freedom. Before Henlein, time was measured by large public clocks in towers or churches. People depended on community bells to know the hour. Henlein's small, Nuremberg eggs, as they came to be known, allowed time to be carried in one's pocket. For the first time, individuals could keep their own measure of life. This small invention quietly reshaped society, making time deeply personal. Then there is the remarkable story of John Harrison of England, an almost legendary figure in horology. In the 1700s, one of the greatest challenges of exploration was the problem of longitude. Sailors could navigate north and south by the stars, but east and west remained uncertain. Ships were lost, lives were taken, and fortunes vanished at sea. Harrison, a humble carpenter turned clockmaker, devoted his life to solving this mystery. With his series of marine chronometers, he made it possible to know a ship's precise position across oceans. His clocks saved countless lives and transformed trade, exploration, and empire. Though he fought for recognition during his lifetime, today Harrison stands as one of history's true pioneers of time. The story continues with Thomas Tompion, often called the father of English clockmaking. Born in 1639, Tompion's skill elevated clocks into both scientific instruments and works of art. His partnership with scientist Robert Hooke advanced the use of the balance spring, which made timekeeping more accurate than ever before. Tompion's workshop in London became a model of excellence, training apprentices who would carry his legacy forward. His clocks are treasured today not only for their precision, but also for their beauty, the engravings, the elegance of their cases, and the harmony of their ticking. France, too, gave the world masters of horology. Abraham Louis Breguet, born in 1747, brought refinement and innovation to an entirely new level. He created mechanisms that reduced friction, improved accuracy, and added elegance to design. His clients included kings, queens, and great thinkers of Europe. To own a Breguet timepiece was to hold a symbol of status and intelligence, as much as of wealth. His work introduced the tourbillon, a mechanism that countered the effects of gravity on a watch's accuracy. Even today, watchmakers study Breguet's designs as the height of craftsmanship. His name is still spoken with reverence wherever fine watches are admired. Switzerland, now known as the heart of watchmaking, was shaped by countless skilled hands, but among them stands Philippe Patek, who co-founded Patek Philippe in the 1800s. His vision was not only to make precise timepieces but to craft them as heirlooms, passed through families for generations. The Swiss tradition of careful artistry, combined with innovation, helped secure Switzerland's lasting reputation in the world of horology. Through Patek's dedication, timekeeping became not only practical but deeply emotional, a gift between generations, a link between past and future. It is important also to remember the many unnamed artisans who filled workshops across Europe and Asia. For every Henlein or Harrison, there were dozens of quiet masters who polished wheels, shaped cases, and repaired mechanisms. Their names may not appear in books, but their contribution is no less. Every village, every town, had a clockmaker whose work kept daily life in order. They repaired the tower bells, maintained the household pendulums, and ensured that communities stayed connected to the rhythm of time. These local craftsmen may never be called famous, but they were lifelines of trust and skill. Clockmakers also found a place in culture and imagination. They were often viewed as figures of mystery, bending metal and wood to control something invisible, time itself. Villagers would see the inside of a clock and marvel at the complexity of gears, springs, and pendulums. For many, clockmakers seemed like magicians, capable of binding the endless flow of time into a small, ticking box. This aura gave clockmakers a special respect, almost like guardians of life's most precious resource. The legacy of these famous names and countless hidden ones lives on in every tick we hear today. When a clock rests on a mantle, when a watch is worn on the wrist, we are touching centuries of human determination. We are hearing the voices of Henlein, Harrison, Tompion, Breguet, and so many others whisper through the gentle movement of gears. Their lives remind us that timekeeping is not only a matter of science but of spirit, imagination, and deep human need. To think of these figures as we listen to a clock's tick is to connect ourselves to history. Their patience and brilliance continue to shape our daily lives, silently, steadily, and faithfully. Just as their clocks once guided ships, marked kings' hours, or comforted families, their spirit still moves through each moment we measure today. Like and subscribe. In the quiet streets of 16th-century Nuremberg, a city alive with trade, craft, and new ideas, there lived a man who would forever change the way humanity carried time. His name was Peter Henlein, a locksmith and clockmaker whose small invention became the seed of modern personal timekeeping. To speak of Henlein is to tell the story of how time, once bound to towers and church bells, became something that could rest in the palm of a hand or be tucked into a pocket. Before Henlein's work, time belonged to the community. In towns across Europe, great mechanical clocks were built into cathedrals and towers, their bells echoing across the streets to announce each passing hour. People rose, worked, ate, and rested by these public rhythms. But private, portable time was unknown. Life was measured in shared signals rather than personal moments. Henlein's creation altered this rhythm forever, shifting the experience of time from the collective to the individual. Henlein's story begins with his early training as a locksmith. Lockmaking was itself a delicate trade, demanding fine metalwork and precise mechanics. A locksmith had to understand how small parts interacted, how tension could be balanced, and how durability could be achieved in tiny devices. These skills translated naturally into clockmaking, especially at a time when the field was young and experimental. It was in this overlap of crafts that Henlein's imagination flourished. Around the year 1510, Henlein is believed to have built one of the earliest portable spring-driven watches. These were later called the Nuremberg eggs, not because of their shape, many were more spherical than egg-like, but because of their place of origin. Made of brass, these small timekeepers were powered by coiled springs rather than the weights that earlier clocks had relied on. By winding the spring, the device could run for hours, ticking gently and steadily. Though they were not perfectly accurate, often drifting by several hours in a day, they represented something extraordinary, the ability to carry time with you. To imagine the impact of this invention, picture a merchant in Nuremberg placing such a device in his pouch before traveling to another town. For the first time, he was not dependent on distant church bells or public towers to know the hour. He carried his own measure of the day, a personal clock that gave him independence. This was more than convenience, it was a subtle shift in human consciousness. Time was no longer only communal, it was private, individual, and portable. Henlein's watches were also admired for their craftsmanship. They were not merely machines, but symbols of skill and status. Nobles and wealthy merchants sought them as treasures, both practical and ornamental. The cases were often engraved, polished, and decorated, turning each watch into a small piece of art. To own a Henlein watch was to carry a blend of science, craft, and prestige in one's pocket. The invention also spoke of ambition. Though Henlein may not have imagined the global reach of his work, he demonstrated that time could be miniaturized, that precision could be placed into the hands of ordinary people. From his workshop in Nuremberg, the idea spread outward, inspiring generations of clockmakers across Europe. The seeds he planted grew into the vast traditions of pocket watches and, later, wristwatches that we know today. It is worth remembering, too, that Henlein lived in a time of transformation. The Renaissance was reshaping Europe with new art, science, and exploration. Just as explorers set sail to discover new lands, inventors like Henlein explored the hidden landscapes of mechanics and motion. His little watches fit perfectly into the spirit of the age, curiosity, progress, and the pursuit of mastery. Henlein's life was not long, records suggest he passed away in the early 1540s. Yet in those decades, he left behind a legacy far greater than himself. His name continues to be linked with the birth of portable time, though historians debate the exact extent of his role. Some argue that other craftsmen of the period were experimenting with similar devices, and that Henlein's fame grew partly from legend. Still, the legend itself carries truth. He represented the possibility of taking time into one's own hands, of shrinking the vast machinery of towers into a personal companion. Today, when we look at a pocket watch or even a wristwatch, we see echoes of Henlein's vision. Every spring that coils, every gear that turns, and every tick that beats softly against the ear traces its ancestry back to his workshop in Nuremberg. His invention reminds us that progress often begins not with grand gestures, but with quiet patience, metal shaped by steady hands, springs wound with care, and an imagination that dared to dream smaller. The story of Peter Henlein is not only about mechanics, it is about the intimacy of time. By creating the pocket watch, he gave people the power to carry their hours with them, to glance at a device and know, privately and silently, where they stood in the flow of the day. It was a gift that forever altered how humanity lived, traveled, and thought about life itself. Like and subscribe. The 18th century was a time of ships, sails, and discovery. Great nations sent their vessels across oceans in search of trade, power, and knowledge. But amid this age of exploration, there existed a silent danger that haunted every sailor, the problem of longitude. Navigating the seas without knowing one's exact position was like wandering through a fog without a guide. Ships could drift hundreds of miles off course, and many did, sometimes ending in shipwreck or starvation. For centuries, brilliant minds struggled to solve this mystery. And into this challenge stepped a humble carpenter's son named John Harrison. Harrison was born in 1693 in Yorkshire, England. Unlike many great inventors of his time, he did not begin life in privilege or scholarly circles. Instead, he learned the patient skills of woodcraft, working with his hands, shaping timber, and listening to the rhythms of nature. From an early age, he was fascinated by mechanics and by sound. It is said that he once studied the swinging of a pendulum while recovering from an illness, keeping himself entertained by observing its steady motion. What to others might have been a simple curiosity, to Harrison became the seed of a lifetime's devotion, the pursuit of perfect timekeeping. At sea, latitude, the distance north or south of the equator, could be calculated by observing the stars and the sun. But longitude, east or west position, remained elusive. Without accurate time, sailors had no way of comparing their local time at sea with the time at a fixed location, such as Greenwich. Even a small error in time could mean a ship strayed far from its intended course. Lives, fortunes, and empires depended on a solution. The British government, desperate to safeguard its navy and trade, established the Longitude Act of 1714, offering a reward of up to £20,000 for anyone who could solve the problem. Most scientists of the time believed the answer would be found in the skies. Astronomers searched for ways to chart the heavens, to use eclipses, stars, or the moon as a celestial map. But Harrison looked not to the skies, but to the ticking heart of the clock. He believed that if a timepiece could be made accurate and reliable enough to survive the tossing waves, shifting temperatures, and damp salt air of a voyage, then longitude could be solved. It was a daring idea, because no clock of that era was nearly precise enough. Harrison's early experiments were extraordinary. Working with wood as well as metal, he built long-case clocks that ran with remarkable accuracy, using wooden gears treated to resist changes in temperature and humidity. His understanding of materials was instinctive and practical, the gift of a craftsman who spent his life working with his hands. But he was not content with keeping time on land. His dream was to build a marine chronometer, a portable clock that would keep time with unerring accuracy aboard a ship. In 1730, Harrison presented his first design to the Board of Longitude. With determination, he set about constructing his first marine timekeeper, known as H1. It was large and intricate, almost like a miniature machine room, with counterweights, balances, and delicate cogs. Though it was not perfect, it proved that his vision could work. Encouraged, he refined his designs further, producing H2 and H3, each more sophisticated than the last. But still, something was missing. The devices were too large, too complicated, too sensitive to changes at sea. Years turned into decades. Harrison was tireless, though often frustrated by the skepticism of scholars and the slow pace of official recognition. Yet he never abandoned his quest. His persistence bore fruit in the form of H4, a timekeeper that was no longer a massive contraption but instead resembled a large pocket watch. This was a breakthrough. The H4 was elegant, portable, and above all, accurate. When tested on a voyage to Jamaica in 1761, H4 amazed its observers. It lost only 5 seconds over the course of the journey, a level of accuracy never before achieved at sea. For the first time in history, a ship could know its longitude with confidence. Harrison had solved the centuries-old problem. But the recognition he deserved did not come easily. The Board of Longitude was hesitant, doubting that a practical carpenter could have achieved what learned astronomers could not. Harrison had to struggle for years, petitioning King George III himself before he was finally granted much of the prize money. Though justice came late, it did come, and Harrison lived to see his work acknowledged. The significance of his invention cannot be overstated. Harrison's chronometers saved lives, protected ships, and reshaped global navigation. They allowed sailors to cross oceans with newfound safety, linking continents more closely and securely than ever before. In a sense, Harrison gave humanity mastery over the seas, not by building ships or sails, but by mastering time itself. Yet his story is not just one of invention, it is also one of character. Harrison's life teaches patience, resilience, and the quiet strength of a man who pursued perfection not for glory, but for the simple belief that it could be done. His marine chronometers stand as symbols of dedication, each tick of their hands a tribute to years of persistence. Today, the original H1, H2, H3, and H4 can be seen at the Royal Observatory in Greenwich. Visitors marvel at the intricate beauty of these timekeepers, but more than that, they feel the spirit of Harrison himself. A carpenter's son, guided by curiosity and determination, solved one of history's greatest challenges. Each soft tick of his creations whispers of the oceans they once guided, the lives they once saved, and the legacy of a man who refused to give up. Like and subscribe. As clocks moved beyond church towers and public squares, they began to find a place within the walls of private homes. This transformation was not sudden, nor was it universal. For many centuries, a household clock was a symbol of wealth, prestige, and refinement, something that only the prosperous could afford. Yet as time passed and the craft of clockmaking advanced, these instruments slowly became companions of daily life, quietly marking the hours in parlors, kitchens, and bedrooms across England. The earliest household clocks were large, heavy, and often immovable. They were works of art as much as they were instruments, their cases carved with ornate designs, their dials painted with rich colors and golden accents. In the 16th and 17th centuries, a clock in the home was not merely a timekeeper, it was a declaration. To own one was to say, here is a family that values order, knowledge, and standing. Visitors would notice its presence immediately, often gazing in awe at its face, for such objects were rare and expensive. By the 17th century, the arrival of the long-case clock, often called the grandfather clock, transformed the atmosphere of English homes. These tall and elegant figures stood proudly in corners or hallways, their pendulums swinging with a steady rhythm, their chimes echoing gently through the rooms. They were not just machines, they became members of the household. Families grew accustomed to the comfort of their sounds, the striking of the hour, the soothing tick of the pendulum, the melody of the chimes. Children would sometimes fall asleep to their rhythm, while adults found reassurance in the certainty of time's passage. The clock's presence in English homes also reflected changing attitudes toward daily life. With reliable timekeeping close at hand, families could structure their days with more precision. The ringing of a clock might signal mealtimes, the start of work, or the evening gathering by the fire. Time, once guided by the rising and setting of the sun, now entered the intimacy of domestic life.
Even in stormy weather, when the sky gave no clue to the hour, the household clock stood as a constant and faithful guide. Clocks were also deeply personal. Many bore inscriptions, family crests, or symbolic engravings. They were often given as gifts to mark important occasions such as weddings or inheritances. A clock might remain in a family for generations, passed down like a treasured heirloom, carrying with it the memory of those who had once listened to its gentle tick. For many, it was the most valuable possession in the home, treated with reverence and care. As the 18th century progressed, clockmaking flourished. The artistry of the cases became as admired as the mechanics within. Cabinetmakers and clockmakers often collaborated, with craftsmen using oak, walnut, or mahogany to create elegant forms. Some clocks were adorned with brass fittings or glass panels, showcasing the pendulum's graceful motion. Others included painted dials depicting pastoral scenes, stars, or phases of the moon. Each one was unique, a blend of science and beauty that reflected the character of its maker and the taste of its owner. For the middle classes, the increasing availability of smaller clocks opened new possibilities. Mantel clocks, bracket clocks, and wall clocks began to appear in more modest homes, offering families the gift of time without the grandeur of a towering long case. These smaller timepieces made clock ownership more attainable, spreading the presence of measured time across England. The symbolism of clocks in homes extended beyond practicality. They reminded people of the passage of life itself. The tick was not only a sound of hours slipping by but also a gentle whisper of mortality, a reminder to use one's days wisely. In literature and poetry, the household clock often appeared as a symbol of reflection, marking the contrast between fleeting human life and the steady, impartial march of time. Yet, for many, the clock was less about solemn reminders and more about comfort. It provided reassurance, a sense of order amid the uncertainties of daily existence. Imagine an English household on a winter's evening, the fire crackling, the family gathered in the parlor, and in the background, the clock chiming softly on the hour. Its presence was steady, familiar, and kind, as much a part of the household as the roof overhead. Over time, these clocks became storytellers themselves. Each dent, scratch, or repair carried a tale of generations who had lived alongside them. They marked not just hours, but birthdays, anniversaries, and the simple rhythm of ordinary days. To walk through English homes of the past is to hear their echoes, the ticking voices of history still lingering in corners where long case clocks once stood. Like and subscribe. When one turns from the sturdy, noble clocks of England to the clocks of France, a different character immediately comes to life. Where English clockmakers often emphasized reliability and tradition, French clockmakers leaned into grace, refinement, and artistry. Their creations were not simply timekeepers, they were masterpieces, designed to delight the eye as much as to measure the passing hours. To see a French clock was to encounter beauty, culture, and an invitation to admire not only the march of time but also the elegance of craftsmanship. The French passion for design was deeply rooted in the culture of the 17th and 18th centuries, when art, architecture, and luxury reached dazzling heights. In the age of Louis XIV, known as the Sun King, everything in the royal court was touched by grandeur and splendor. Palaces like Versailles displayed lavish ornamentation, gilded surfaces, and artistic flourishes, and clocks naturally followed this style. Clockmakers worked closely with sculptors, painters, and cabinetmakers to create pieces that blended function with art. A French clock was never just a machine, it was a statement of culture and refinement. One of the hallmarks of French clock design was the use of gilded bronze, or ormolu. Cases were adorned with golden figures, floral patterns, and mythological scenes, shining with warmth in candlelit rooms. A clock on a French mantelpiece might depict Cupid with his bow, Apollo with his lyre, or delicate garlands of leaves and flowers. Each detail was carefully shaped to catch the light, making the clock as much a sculpture as a timekeeper. These designs reflected not just the skill of the clockmaker but also the collaboration of multiple artists, each contributing to the creation of a singular masterpiece. The French also excelled at proportion and elegance in form. Unlike the tall and imposing long-case clocks of England, French clocks often came in smaller, more refined forms. Mantel clocks, in particular, became a symbol of French artistry. They were designed to sit gracefully upon fireplaces, tables, or shelves, their size allowing them to fit harmoniously into finely decorated interiors. Their presence did not overwhelm the room, rather, it enhanced the atmosphere with a sense of luxury and taste. In addition to mantels, bracket clocks and table clocks flourished in France. These pieces often included painted dials with delicate numerals, fine hands shaped like filigree, and glass coverings that allowed a view of the intricate movements inside. Some even incorporated musical elements, playing gentle tunes at intervals, a charming addition to the tick of the pendulum or the strike of the bell. In a French home, a clock was not only a guardian of time but also a centerpiece of conversation and admiration. The French Revolution in the late 18th century changed the course of design, yet clocks remained central to the culture. As society shifted, so too did styles, moving from the elaborate grandeur of the Rococo period to the cleaner, more balanced forms of neoclassicism. In this new aesthetic, clocks were often adorned with columns, laurel wreaths, or motifs inspired by ancient Greece and Rome. Even in simplicity, however, the French touch of refinement remained, the balance between elegance and function never lost. Perhaps the most distinctive contribution of French design was its ability to blend art with daily life. While English homes valued clocks for their practicality and reliability, French households saw them as part of an artistic whole. A French clock did not merely hang on a wall or stand in a corner, it was woven into the identity of the home, a piece that spoke of culture, sophistication, and taste. Guests might pause before it, admiring its form as much as its function, recognizing in its golden glow the artistry of France. The influence of French designs extended far beyond the nation's borders. Collectors and aristocrats across Europe sought them eagerly, and many were exported to grace the homes of nobility in England, Spain, and beyond. Even today, antique French clocks are treasured for their beauty, their elegance as captivating now as it was centuries ago. Museums display them as examples of artistic brilliance, while collectors cherish them as enduring symbols of refinement. To imagine the elegance of French designs is to picture a Parisian salon, with its chandeliers sparkling, its mirrors reflecting golden light, and upon the mantel, a clock that gleams with delicate beauty. Its hands move silently over a dial of porcelain, framed in gilded bronze, while figures of cherubs or muses dance upon its case. In such a setting, time itself feels transformed, less a reminder of passing hours, more a companion to art, music, and conversation. The French clockmaker's gift was not simply in marking time, but in elevating it. By wrapping the steady rhythm of the tick in beauty, they gave the hours a new dignity, turning each moment into a work of art. Their designs endure as proof that even in the simple act of keeping time, humanity has always sought not only function but also elegance, grace, and meaning. Like and subscribe. As we bring this journey to a gentle close, let us pause for a moment and listen again to the sound that guided us through the centuries, the soft, steady tick of the clock. From the shadows of ancient sundials to the artistry of French designs, and from the steady hands of apprentices to the grand innovations of masters, timekeeping has always been more than measurement. It has been a story of human patience, creativity, and the desire to make each passing hour meaningful. In every clockmaker's workshop, whether tucked away in a medieval town or glittering in the salons of France, one can see a reflection of our own relationship with time. We seek order, beauty, and reassurance in its rhythm. The gentle tick has carried people to sleep, woken them at dawn, and reminded them that while hours may pass, the moments we fill them with are what truly endure. Perhaps tonight, as you drift toward rest, you may imagine those quiet workshops, the glow of candlelight on polished brass, and the soothing sound of gears moving in harmony. Time continues, steady and sure, but within that certainty, there is comfort. Thank you for joining me in exploring the timeless world of clockmakers. If you enjoyed this story and would like to hear more, do not forget to like and subscribe for next video.